English translation. 254th contact, Tuesday, 28th of November, 1995, 23:33 hours.
It is indeed a pleasure that you have come personally. I was actually expecting Florena. It was indeed she whom I asked to clear up the miserable matter. Still, that is why you are also here, is it not?
Certainly, because I considered the matter important enough that I should concern myself about everything immediately. A quick clarification was necessary. Because not only are you impacted by the matter, rather also the photographic evidence that you have prepared according to our direction, in that you have photographed the pertinent flying device. Now these are the circumstances. We already worked with those flying devices, which you call the cake ship in the 20s, but it was indeed only at the end of the 70s that they were brought to the required status for their use on the Earth. The form of these flying devices was specially thought up for the Earth, for which reason we made the effort to transmit the entire necessary specifications for the design to terrestrial scientists through impulse telepathy so that, out of that, flying discs could be developed. This impulse telepathic information went predominantly to aerospace technicians, as I will designate these persons, whereby especially German engineers were included for this, to whom we transmitted exact plans for the external form, as well as certain technical particulars which were responsible to transmit. Thereby the German scientists also actually experimented, whereby they could construct halfway suitable flying discs, which according to our thinking at those times should have been used to constitute an air power through which an early brought-about world peace should have been achieved. However, the political machinations changed very quickly into a war-based direction, for which reason we brought an end to further impulse telepathic information to the German scientists and allowed the project to expire, whereby we, however, initially transmitted false information so that the flying discs could not be created specifically for warlike purposes. However, the plans existed furthermore in isolated copies because we could not obtain them all. Which was, however, no longer bad, because these still existing papers were extremely incomplete and disappeared in this form. In practice, these drafts were only available as sketches which only showed the outer ring and the underside of the flying device, while the extension underneath and the construction of the top were no longer available. And it is exactly these sketches of the outer ring as well as its underside which survived for several decades and reappeared in the middle of the 60s. Though this happened without our knowledge, because since the disappearance of the sketches, which had become useless, we concerned ourselves no further about that until just now, when you called Florena and communicated to her that you discovered that the forms of lids for large containers exist, which in their configuration and construction are made exactly the same as the lower ring and its underside of our flying device and show the same structure more than only approximately. And because you gave one of these kinds of lids to Florena in order to provide clarification, it was easy for us to compare it with the construction of the flying device, which made the astonishing sameness clear to us, which also gave us occasion to dedicate our attention to the matter. Therefore, we cleared everything up very precisely, and thereby found out that the sketches which surfaced again were evaluated in industrial firms and found application, and that these same sketches were utilized for the design and manufacture of forms of lids which were completely atypical, because until then, the designers usually only ever drafted forms of lids which showed simple lines, however, never forms which could be called futuristic and complicated. Thus came about the form of the lids for the container named by you, whereby the form of the lids, as I already said, is deceptively similar to the area of the lower ring and its underside, as is shown by our flying devices which relate to this.
Phew, that is quite a story. but it appears logical to me. But that probably does not mean that, in spite of that, a trap will not be laid for me accusing me of fraud because of the photographs of the cake ship. As a precaution, I have removed most of the pictures from the albums, at least for a certain time.
I would also advise you to do such a thing, just for a certain time, as you say. However, those who are malicious, who are known to you and who want to denigrate and damage you, will give you no peace in spite of that, and will continue to accuse you of lying, swindling, and defrauding. That cannot be avoided, especially not in relation to those powers who are driven by hate and jealousy, as with your wife and so forth.
That is clear to me.
The really honest ones will continue to stand with you and recognize the truth for what it is, as you bring and explain it to them. You have nothing to hide because you are not to blame for neither a lie nor a swindle nor fraud nor charlatanism. Therefore, do not allow yourself to be ground down or undermined by those who are malevolent and malicious, who will never give up finding various things in order to be able to defame you, because these humans are sick from hate, envy, and jealousy. Therefore, they believe there is something to find in everything and anything which you could have used deceitfully in order to falsify photographic evidence and so forth. They are sick in their thinking and behavior and in their feelings in such a manner that they torment and destroy themselves and obstruct their evolution. That is unfortunately so in your own family.
Unfortunately. Already a long time ago, you promised me that you would give me a closer explanation as to how at least a portion of my photographs and films were falsified. But we have obviously both forgotten that again and again. Could you not explain that to me now?
I actually have not thought any more about that. It was as follows. Various deceivers, who wanted to inflict damage on you, and who continue to attempt this, have constructed from your photographs exact models of our ships and have thereby taken their new and falsified pictures in the respective correct places where the original pictures were taken. They utilized tripods and cameras for this, whereby the very exact same picture sections were established as with your photographs, in order to subsequently bring the models, which were hung on thin threads and wires from long poles, into the correct position and to photograph them. Photographs falsified in this manner are trafficked today by various people and passed off as your falsifications in order, by these means, to accuse you of fraud. In this regard, also your original films were stolen and adulterated, in which our flying objects were equipped with threads and wires which were copied into the film and negatives, or conjured into them in some other manner.
But that is nothing new, because you already explained that to me earlier.
Then we have really talked about it before.
And what did you find out because of the new lying story of Randy Winters, who claims that a man in Florida, who does not want to mention his name, but is called a drain by him, has been in contact with one of you from the Pleiades for 29 years, namely from the sun, that is to say the star Alcyone, which is a joke anyway, because you live on planets and not on stars. Winters also claims that the man took a lot of pictures of your ships and so forth.
We can also end this matter with short words, because not only we know, but also you know, that the whole story is a single work of lies of a drain Winters. The photos allegedly taken with a Polaroid camera are forgeries copied from your real photos, at least a large part of them. The sun Alcyone in our space-time continuum has no planets, therefore no humans can live there. A drain is an infamous liar, swindler, and deceiver, who now wants to become big in the UFO circles in this dishonest wise and take revenge on you because you spread the truth about him. And since he only spreads a story of lies of his own invention, of course there are no subterranean facilities of any groups of us in America either, through which America, that is to say the American people, are to be raised to a higher level of consciousness, which anyway corresponds to such horrendous nonsense as can only be invented and thought up by a consciousness-based, limited terrestrial human being, like this consciousness-based, lightly disturbed Adrain, who, according to the Arahat Athersata plane, is an Earth-created person who never had anything to do with the travelers of the Hanok lineage or with any other intelligences from areas beyond Earth, which, by the way, does not apply to Michael Heseman, to whom you asked a question about this in February. So he is not a purely Earth-created person.
Thanks for the information. Look here. This is the work of Adrain Winters.
I already know that because you gave it to Florina for me as a copy. But add it to this contact report.
I will do the following right now.
You can insert it right away at our relevant conversation place.
TAS Statement of 27.1. 2005. The whole swindle was uncovered after Adrain had made a big European tour under lies and deception and had gathered a big crowd of believers around himself. In the end, Randy Winters also came across the whole swindle and distanced himself from Adrain, whereby he disappeared into oblivion along with his fake material, which he had fabricated with the help of an equally fraudulent friend. However, the whole process of lying, cheating, and deceiving dragged on for 2 years, leading many Adrain Winters followers astray. Michael Heseman did a great service in revealing the Adrain fraud through enlightening articles in Magazine 2000 and brought the fraud story to its knees.
That is what I meant by my words. But say, dear friend, because of the flying discs of the Germans, one hears strange things again and again. Is it true that flight tests were actually carried out, with the discs reaching Mars and an altitude of 12,000 meters?
Such assertions are absurd, because the flying gyroscopes, as they were really called, did not find such perfection in Germany, and the fact that flights into space should have taken place with them corresponds to a fantasy imagining. On the other hand, flying discs were later built in other countries, for example in South America. In the former Soviet Union and in America, too, efforts were made to build such aircraft after the occupying forces of Germany had received the corresponding construction plans, which were so incomplete that the new plan owners themselves had to do a great deal of work and contribute so that the flying discs could be built, but which could also only be used for terrestrial airspace, as is still the case with these aircraft today, apart from a certain group in South America, as you know.
I remember, yes, but we are not supposed to give any details about that in public when I am...
You remember correctly.
Can you still tell me whether the construction plans for the flying discs seized by the occupying powers were the same kind that you impulse telepathically transmitted to the Germans? And who was actually responsible for them?
You mean those plans from which the covers were finally made?
Exactly.
The transmissions went to 2 men named Schriever and Maeta, who also dealt with self-constructed plans for flying gyroscopes. It was these plans that fell into the hands of the Americans and the Soviets, who then devoted themselves to their studies and construction. Also, the group in South America came into the possession of copies of the same flying gyroscopes, namely by theft.
Surely one may say that this group was higher Nazis, who fled Germany at the end of the war and disappeared to South America.
But you should not say more about it.
Of course not. Because of the Second World War, disc-shaped flying devices were observed in Germany and even all over the world.
That corresponds to the circumstances, yes. These flying devices, however, were not of earthly origin, but they belonged to us as well as to our Federation allies.
So the observed flying discs had no relation whatsoever with the flying discs or flying gyroscopes of the Germans. Then other assertions are actually only stupid assertions of liars, fantasists, and know-it-alls, etc. We actually wanted to know that for a long time.
But that only refers to the flying gyroscopes of Schriever and Methe.
Were there any others?
There were, yes. These, however, were in private research, secretly conducted by power-hungry Nazis, using the plans of Schriever and Methe. These flying gyroscopes had already been further developed in Germany and achieved test flights that produced good results.
Today's South American group?
Your assumption is correct.
And all this could happen under the eyes of the Gestapo?
Many of the major Gestapo and SS leaders were involved and secretly working to keep the rest of the world ignorant of the constructions and test flights, etc. And when the end of the war came, they fled to South America with all their material and all their people. This was not a difficult undertaking for them, because the flying gyroscopes were already so airworthy that they could circumnavigate the Earth non-stop and transport away all materials and people before the Allied forces could seize them or find out anything about these secrets.
So that is how it happened. But how far has the construction of the Schriever and Methe flying gyroscopes advanced?
On 15.7. 1941, the prototype was ready for the first test flight. We monitored this very closely. But the flying gyroscopes were not built according to our transmissions, because these had already been made unsuitable by us by false information, because we saw the great danger, which would have resulted from it for the entire earthly humankind. However, we undertook nothing against the development of the Schriever and Methe flying gyroscopes until we realized that they suddenly posed a tremendous threat to humanity. Consequently, we interfered in the preparations for the first test flight, just at the time when it was certain for us that the flight would be a complete success, and the mass production of the flying gyroscopes would ensue, which would have meant that with the help of these flying machines, the entire earthly humankind would have been subjugated and enslaved, which, however, did not lie in their destiny, and also does not lie in their destiny in the future. So we asked the Arahat Athersata plane what to do in this particular case, and then followed their advice to damage the project and completely destroy the flying gyroscopes and 3 other semi-finished specimens by transferring malfunctions into the machinery of the gyroscopes, destroying them in an explosive manner.
And why did you do that to those who later escaped to South America?
They meant no danger to the world and humankind, and they still do not today. They have meanwhile shrunk to a small group that has no more clout and is slowly dying out, because in the pure male world in which they live no offspring are to be expected. Women and children are frowned upon, for they live solely by their technology and their desires for world domination, which, however, they are unable to realize. They live isolated for themselves, even if they often fly around the world with their flying discs, whereby they can also be observed here and there. They do not look for followers in the world outside either, because they are afraid that they might be betrayed by newcomers. As a result, they are completely closed off and have long since given up all attempts to find followers somewhere outside. All of them have also grown old since then, with the youngest now 78 years old. The whole group counts to today only 334 men, of once more than 2,000 men. The rest have all died of illness or accidents, such as mistaken experiments or flying disc crashes, or they have died quite normally.
Then one can justifiably say that they are no longer any danger. I have another question that interests me, and if I am to be honest, Guido is also interested. Maybe you do not know the answer either. Then you would have to ask higher up. The question is this. When the first original idea emerged from the absolute nothing and created the first creation, Was it a simple or a multiple form? I mean, was there a single creation, or its 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7? Was this first creation as creation or universe also created by an explosion, so to speak, an bang?
I can give you information about this. The first creation took place through an unimaginably powerful explosion, which must have been many times more powerful than is the case with a normal universe creation. Not only a creation or a universe was created, nor were its 2 or 3, but its 49 first creation forms.
49 universes with a single great bang. Man, oh man, I would not have dreamed that. Man, do you perhaps also know whether the 7-7 multiplication of the evolution times of the creation forms will come to an end? Or whether the 7-7 multiplication will last until the entrance to creation? A further question. How many creation forms are there at present in their entirety in evolutionary development?
I cannot answer these questions due to my ignorance in this regard.
Could you have the Arahat Athersata level ask of the Patah-Ali plane?
This is not necessary, because due to all the questions and Guidu's questions in connection with the origin of the first creation, I have already raised these questions before and had them directed to the Patah-Ali level. I did this in anticipation of the fact that one day you would certainly also come to me with these questions, which you have just done. Unfortunately, I have to disappoint you with an answer, because even the level Patah-Ali does not know how to give information about it. Your knowledge ends where it is certain that the first creation originated in 49-fold form.
Too bad. It would have been so nice if we could have received an answer to that. But do you then perhaps know what results as average creations? I mean, how many multiple creations per creation can be assumed as a percentage?
We were also interested in this question, but the Patah-Ali level was not able to answer it either. There is only the consideration that the multiple creations are predominant, and therefore simple creations are less common. According to the statements at the Patah-Ali level, such secrets cannot be fathomed by them either. Also, the remaining knowledge about the beginning of all beginnings does not originate from their own research, but from the knowledge of the creation itself, to which the Patah-Ali level already has access, but only to a certain extent. The Arahat Athersata forms also explain that. On the other hand, the knowledge of the creation itself is probably also limited in these matters, and only further and higher forms of creation have more information at their disposal.
So the higher the evolution, the more knowledge and information. It is logical that in this direction, the same principle prevails as it does with us humans. It would be illogical if this were not the case.
Of course.
In connection with the South American group, which established itself in Brazil after the escape from Germany, which also tried to get me out of the world in 1976. Are those who attempted the murder still alive?
We kept the group under surveillance and will continue to do so until it is completely dissolved. Those involved in the assassination attempt have all died in the meantime. The events of that assassination took place in the Winkelried field near Wetzikon, which we talked about at the 65th Contact on the 23rd of October 1976. See Pleiadisch-Pleiadianische Kontaktberichte, Volume 2, pages 349-352. We explained to you then that the South American group, which actually has its camp in Brazil, wanted to kill you because they feared that you would betray them to the competent authorities because of your knowledge about them.
Are they still of this mistaken opinion?
No. That is also the reason why they did not pursue you any further.
At least something. May I still ask you if you asked in the Arahat Athersata level because of the former names of Richard and Stefan? They both want to know what names they had.
For once I did that. In the future, however, I can no longer get involved with questions of this or a similar kind if the questions do not come expressly only from you. Stefan's name was Askanzar and Richard's name Makinon.
So that was about 13,500 years ago? And what do the names mean?
Askanzar means the witty and Makinon the thoughtful.
Are there any things that would be predictive worth mentioning?
You know we do not talk about that anymore.
Of course. It was just an attempt. Well, if I look at what I have talked about so far, it would be good if I made a contact report out of it, no?
Already through Florina, I let you know that it is entirely up to you to write down the conversations, which is why we save them on the responder machines for your telepathic retrievals. You are free to dispose of it according to your will, but for certain things we must continue to keep it secret from the earthly public and also from the group members.
Of course, thank you. I just wanted to reassure myself again. Then I do not have any more questions now.
For my part, however, I still have to say that you should only call Florina or me when very important things arise for which you need our advice. Florina is very busy with her tasks, which also applies to me, so you should take this into consideration. We will, however, visit you when possible, and it will not fail to be the case that various of our personnel will wander around the center grounds now and then for recreation or linger in your workroom.
I understand, and I will always be happy about visitors. Of course, my office is always available for everyone.
For which we are all grateful. Pay my dear greetings to all, and from my daughters as well as from Quetzal and many others I should also greet you. And now, my friend, I want to go. Goodbye, Salamia.
Goodbye, Salome.